My father used to say the same thing to me over and over again when I was growing up. You'll go much further in life carrying your hat under your arm than wearing it on your head. As a kid, I had absolutely no idea what that meant. To me, it was just another one of those old sayings parents repeat over and over. And honestly, I thought he was simply telling me to be polite. It took me more than 50 years moving to another country, building businesses, getting divorced, starting my life over, and eventually moving back to Poland to finally understand what he was trying to teach me. But life added one more sentence to this lesson, and that's what I want to share with you today. My father wasn't a psychologist, he wasn't a motivational speaker, he never read books about personal development. He was always an ordinary man. He owned a landscaping business in Toronto. He worked hard. He loved people. But there was one thing about him that I didn't fully appreciate until much later in life. He never felt the need to prove his worth. He didn't have to be the smartest person in the room, or the loudest, or the most important. He was simply comfortable being himself, and people naturally enjoyed being around him. I remember one day in Toronto when we were working together, a young guy walked past us. He had his head shaved except for a design carved into the side of his hair. It looked exactly like a Mercedes logo. My father looked at him with a completely serious face and asked, "So, did you get into a car accident? Is this a scar?" There was a second of silence. Then the young man burst out laughing. My father laughed. I laughed. Within a minute, they were talking like old friends. Today, I think most people wouldn't dare say something like that. They would worry about offending someone or being judged. But my father never joked to make anyone feel small. He joked because he genuinely enjoyed people. There was warmth behind it, not ego, not arrogance, just curiosity and kindness. As I got older, I started noticing something. Whether he was talking to a customer, a waiter, a neighbor, or complete stranger, he treated everyone exactly the same. He never acted as if he was better than anyone else, but he never acted as if he was less than anyone else either. And I think that's an important distinction because humility doesn't mean making someone smaller. Humility means recognizing that every person deserves respect, including yourself. Looking back, I think my father wasn't really talking about the hat, he was talking about ego. Because ego has a funny habit. It walks into the room before we do. It wants to be right. It wants to impress people. It wants to win every argument. My father was the opposite. He never seemed interested in proving anything. And maybe that's why people listen to him. Today, when I look around, I sometimes feel like we've forgotten that lesson. Everyone wants to have the last word. Everyone wants to show they know more, they have more, they achieve more. But the most confident people I've ever met rarely felt the need to tell everyone how confident they were. Real confidence is surprisingly quiet. But here's the question that changed everything for me. Was my father always right? Does humility really open every door? Or are there moments when being too humble comes at a price? A few years ago, something happened that completely changed the way I understood my father's words. And that's where the story really begins. A few years ago, I found myself thinking about my father's words in a situation I never expected. I was visiting Wrocław with my son. He was 5 or 6 years old at the time. He told me he had a headache, so I walked into a small convenience store and I politely asked the woman behind the counter, "Do you have anything for a child's headache?" She looked at me without even smiling and said, "I have a hammer." For a second, everything inside me went silent. Not because she couldn't help us, but because the way she spoke to me. You know that feeling when someone makes you feel small for absolutely no reason? I wanted to say something. I wanted to respond. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought. Instead, I turned around, took my son's hand, and walked out. For many years, I believed that was the right thing to do. Don't argue. Don't lower yourself to someone else's level. Walk away. Keep your dignity. And maybe my father would have looked at me and said, "You did the right thing." But today, after everything life has taught me, I'm not sure, because now I ask myself a different question. Did I walk away because I was humble, or because I didn't have the courage to calmly say that wasn't okay? Those are two different things. That's when I began to understand something my father couldn't possibly teach me. Life is more complicated than one simple sentence. Humility is not the same as surrender. Respect is not the same as allowing people to disrespect you. You can be calm, you can be polite, you can treat people with kindness, and at the very same time, you can say, "I'm not okay with the way you're treating me." It took me many years to understand that. A few weeks ago, I made a video about self-respect and healthy boundaries. Thousands of people watched it, and the comments were fascinating. Some people told me they had spent their entire lives trying to please everyone else. Others admitted they had never learned how to say no. One person wrote, "Being too kind almost destroyed my life." Another reminded me of Father Maximilian Kolbe and said, "Be careful not to confuse self-respect with kindness." I sat there reading those comments and I realized something. This isn't really a question about being humble or being strong. It's about knowing when each one is needed. My father taught me to respect people. Life taught me that I also have to respect myself, and how those two lessons don't contradict each other. Because someone who truly respects themselves doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to dominate every conversation, doesn't need to prove they're the smartest person in the room. But they also don't allow themselves to be treated without respect. And I think that's where the line is, the line between humility and giving away your dignity. Then, almost 2 years ago, something happened that made me understand my father's lesson even more deeply. It happened on the day I moved back to Poland after more than 40 years in Canada. The entire conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, but I'll never forget it. Almost 2 years ago, I moved back to Poland after living in Canada for more than 40 years. I arrived with 2 large suitcases, a backpack, and everything I owned packed into few bags. It was a strange feeling. The last time I lived in Poland, I was just a child. This time I was coming back by choice, starting over at 55. And to be honest, I had no idea what was waiting for me. I walked up to passport control. The immigration officer looked at my passport and asked, "What's the purpose of your trip?" I smiled and said, "I'm moving back to Poland permanently. I lived in Canada for over 40 years." He looked at me, smiled back, stamped my passport, and simply said, "Welcome to Poland." That was it. He never opened a single suitcase. He didn't ask another question. He didn't look for a problem where there wasn't one. The whole conversation probably lasted 30 seconds. You might think, well, that's not much of a story. Maybe not, but I still remember that moment today, because sometimes one kind sentence stays with you for years. As I walked away, I caught myself thinking, maybe this is what my father was trying to teach me all along. After the course of my life, I've met thousands of people. Some opened doors, some closed them, some treated me with kindness, others didn't. But I've noticed something: people often respond to the energy you bring into the conversation. If you walk into every situation expecting a fight, you'll usually find one. If you walk in believing everyone owes you something, people can feel that too. But when you approach others with respect, more often than not, respect comes back to you. Not always. Life doesn't work that way, but much more often than we think. That's when I finally understood something. My father never told me to be weak. He never told me to let people walk all over me. He wasn't teaching submission. He was teaching humility. And humility has nothing to do with thinking less of yourself. It simply means you don't need to think you're more important than anyone else. There's a huge difference. Today, I look around and sometimes feel like I've confused confidence with arrogance. Everyone wants to win. Everyone wants the last word. Everyone wants to prove they're right. But the strongest people I've ever met rarely need to prove anything. They were able to say, "You're right, I was wrong, I don't know," and somehow that didn't make them look weaker. It made them look stronger. Today, I think my father gave me one of the greatest lessons of my life. But life added one more sentence to it. There are moments when you should carry your hat under your arm, and there are moments when you need to put the hat back on. Not because of pride, not because of ego, but because of self-respect. That took me much longer to learn. It also made me realize something else. Humility doesn't make you smaller. It simply means you don't have to become bigger than anyone else. And I think that's one of the hardest lessons for us all. You know, after I released my video about self-respect and healthy boundaries, a lot of people wrote to me saying, "That's easier said than done." And they're right, it is, because most of us weren't raised to set boundaries. We were raised to be polite, to avoid conflict, to make people happy, to keep peace. And somewhere along the way, many of us forgot that there's a difference between being kind and abandoning ourselves. Today, at 55 years old, I think my father gave me the foundation. Life built the rest of the house because I eventually learned two lessons. The first one came from him: treat every person with respect, every single one. Not because they've earned it, but because that's the kind of person you want to be. The second lesson life taught me: never pay for someone else's approval with your own dignity. What does my life look like today? Because I finally understood that. It looks peaceful, not perfect, peaceful. I still have problems, I still have difficult days, I still make mistakes, but today I no longer feel the need to prove myself to anyone. I don't argue just to win, I don't chase approval, and I don't stay in relationships, friendships, or situations where respect only goes one way. That has changed everything. Today, I still say please, thank you, good morning. I still believe kindness matters. I still believe humility opens doors. But I also know how to say no without feeling guilty. I know how to walk away without feeling I've failed. Because sometimes walking away is actually an act of self-respect. Sometimes I wonder what my father would say if he could see me today. I think he'd smile, and he'd probably say exactly what he used to say all those years. See, I told you. And for the first time in my life, I think I'd smile back and answer, Dad, you're right. But life taught me one more thing. Humility and self-respect don't compete with each other. They belong together. So today, I don't carry my hat under my arm because I think I'm less than anyone else. I carry it because I don't need my ego to walk into a room before I do. And when someone crosses line, I know how to stand up for myself without becoming the person I never wanted to be. To me, that's what growing older has really been about. Not becoming harder, not becoming louder, not becoming calmer, more confident and a little wiser. Maybe my father was never really talking about a hat. Maybe he was reminding me that character will always take you farther than ego. And looking back now, I think that's one of the greatest gifts he ever gave me. Thank you for spending time with me, and see you in the next video.